at the age of that one study with men over 70 or postmenopausal women, the damage has been done. Like if you haven't built up bone strength or engaged in behaviors that are going to help with bone strength, like vitamin D isn't going to come and save you. Hello and welcome back to the How to Fitness podcast. I'm Kate Lyman.
And I'm Michael Ulloa.
And we have a deep dive today. I have to start by admitting that Michael and I took like 2 minutes to yawn. Before this episode, we both had a terrible night's sleep. Actually, like consecutive terrible night's sleep with our kids. And we just had like a back and forth communication that was just yawning. And then we were like, we need a minute. Let's get all of our yawns out. And the hope is that doesn't creep out during this episode.
You know, one of those days where like coffee doesn't touch the sides. I feel that's the vibe I've got right now. But it's fine. The spirits are high though.
Well, my spirits are very high. It's like my body can't catch up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't feel like mentally funky. I just feel like I could lay down on the cold, hard floor here and fall asleep in 10 seconds.
Easily. I think I could fall asleep standing up at this rate. I would say as well, this is just going to turn into a rant of me and Kate moaning. So thanks for signing in, everyone. I think I'm getting hay fever this year.
Is that that's allergies?
Yeah,
right?
sorry. Yeah, like allergies. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. And I've never had it before. And I'm kind of in denial about it because I've always been like, oh, phew, at least I don't get hay fever, because it feels like when you see people struggling with hay fever allergies, it looks awful. And yeah, I think I might be getting it, and
how would that just like?
It can just happen.
But like then you didn't have it all.
It can just happen. Yeah, so it sometimes just kicks in, unfortunately. And I've been looking up the pollen counts for the days that I feel a bit like, oh, I'm just going to like, pollen count very high. It's
Man, that's not fair.
Yeah, I'm hoping that it's maybe just I had a cold maybe like 2 weeks ago. I'm like, oh, it's just residual. It's fine.
And it's the new cold starting after the old cold. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Oh no.
Yeah. Well, it's fine. We're in good spirits. We're all good. And we also have to update as well, Kate, because you did a podcast episode on creatine.
Yes, and I got the
recently.
best text from Michael the other day. Do tell us. Do give us your update.
So Kate's episode was great. If you haven't listened to it, go back and listen. And I wasn't taking creatine anymore because it was really upsetting my stomach. And Kate had some tips on managing creatine intake. And I've started doing a split dose and... yeah, basically followed your advice, Kate, and it's fine. My stomach is absolutely fine with creatine again.
Amazing.
So I don't want to ruin the findings of the episode. Everyone, please go listen. But with a new baby imminently, literally my wife could give birth any day now, I'm excited that I might get a little bit of benefit from this supplement now. So I'm very happy.
I think at the time we're recording this, it still hasn't come out, but I had mentioned on social media that we are doing that episode, and I've had countless conversations about it already, and I've had to be like, nope, you gotta wait, there's some good stuff in here. So Michael, today we're doing an episode that's similar in that we're talking about a supplement, micronutrient, and doing a little deep dive. Tell us what's coming.
We're hitting vitamin D today. So it's one of those where I know, especially in the UK, there's like general recommendations of like, you should take vitamin D. We'll cover this a bit later in the episode. And I get asked a lot about vitamin D. Should I take it? Who should be taking it? What amounts? Blah, blah, blah. So I thought, this could be quite a cool little signposting episode when people come to us with questions. We're just going to kind of run through all the research as we usually do, tell you what's nonsense, tell you what might work, and then hopefully you can go away from this episode clued up, safe in the knowledge that you're taking the right steps for your health. So it's a bit of a nerdy one today, but I think that anyone clicking on an episode about vitamin D is probably down for that. So it's I'm excited for this one.
You know what you're getting. Also, you get to hear Michael say vitamin. And you have to hear me say vitamin.
There we go. Culture shock.
Sorry. Vitamin.
Yeah, I'll apologize and Kate will apologize for the listeners, depending on who's getting angry at us.
I don't know. It sounds nice when you say it. It sounds dumb when I say it. But
no, I quite like it. There's a lot of times where I will say words in the American way for a lot of kind of medical abbreviations and stuff. And I think they sound better the American way than the English way. But the English, British.
Yeah.
Sorry if I'm insulting anyone part of the UK or whatever. But yeah, it's vitamin for me with my very posh sounding Southern English accent. Sorry.
We'll let the listeners decide what they like more.
Cool. So today we're shining light on the so-called sunshine vitamin. So vitamin D. We've all heard that vitamin D is important, but how much do we really need, and what can it actually do? And as I said, we're going to kind of explore why there's so much buzz around vitamin D, from kind of bone health, immunity, mood, that kind of stuff, and even kind of touch on COVID, which I know is always a fun conversation to cover on the internet because people get quite weird about it. But we'll dig into what the science says about taking vitamin D, and then hopefully by the end of it, you'll know whether kind of supplementing or not is worth it or just hype. I would also like to say, in regards to this episode, like a little disclaimer: this is for informational purposes only and not intended as medical advice. So always speak to your doctor or healthcare provider before making any changes to your supplement routine, please. So yeah, should we kick into it?
Let's do it.
So vitamin D is often called the sunshine vitamin because our skin makes it when we are exposed to sunlight. So technically vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, which means that it dissolves in fats and can be stored in the body's fatty tissues. So although it is a vitamin, it acts more like a hormone in many ways in the way that it interacts with cells all over the body. And there are two main forms. There's vitamin D3 and vitamin D2. I was going to try and say the scientific terms of these, but they're one of those words that just going to not sound like you know what you're talking about when you try and pronounce it. So vitamin D3, which we produce in our skin, and you can also get from animal sources, and vitamin D2 is the one that comes from plant sources like certain mushrooms and yeasts. So kind of just like the first tip to take away from this episode is vitamin D3 is the one that you always want to consider supplementing with. So if you are buying a vitamin D supplement, just check the label, because you want to make sure it's vitamin D3. It's the one that all the research shows the benefits from. So that's the kind of first takeaway. But both forms can be used in supplements or fortified foods. But yeah, vitamin D3 is the one that our bodies makes naturally, and tends to raise blood levels more efficiently. And these minerals are crucial for building healthy bones and teeth and for maintaining muscle function. So without enough vitamin D, we can't absorb calcium properly, which means our bones can become weak. And if anyone has severe vitamin D deficiency, especially like in children, it can cause rickets, a disease that leads to kind of like soft, deformed bones. And in adults, it can cause kind of osteoporosis and lots of kind of painful softening of the bone issues. Even milder deficiency can contribute to osteoporosis too. So there's kind of levels of severity over time, but in short, it's foundational for musculoskeletal health. So it's a pretty darn important one. Do you supplement with vitamin D, Kate? We should probably cover that before we kick in as well.
I actually do not. And I'm open to changing that, but I've always considered I know that we can get it from multiple sources, but I've always considered like my sunlight exposure adequate because of where I live and how I am out and about. But I don't. But I also just like don't really take anything. And even when I hear like, okay, you're omega-3 and you're blah, 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 I'm like, I'm just lazy about it. Is that like, that's the actual answer. I'm lazy about it.
I think your diet's pretty solid though, right? So, and the place you live, so you kind of have a bit more flexibility with that than
right.
some, I guess.
So. I will say actually when I lived in Utah, I did take vitamin D3.
Okay.
Specifically.
This is my ignorance here, and there's many states in the US, so I'm not going to feel too bad for this, but what's like the climate like there in Utah?
The winters are like snowy, cold, gray. The summers are actually very lovely, but the winter's kind of long too.
Okay. Yeah, I do supplement with vitamin D most of the year round. I feel like you're showing off here, Kate, by living in Mexico, but yeah, living in Scotland, even the summers can be pretty non-summery. It's probably the kindest way to say it. Yeah.
And I feel like you've told me that like your government gives you all vitamin D supplements. Is that right?
Yeah. So
am I making that up?
Like if you're deficient, you kind of in Scotland you get free prescriptions. So if anything's prescribed, it's free. There's some caveats to that, but mostly, I know like for infants, for example, my son, you get given vitamin D supplements to give your kids as well. So yeah, we're quite fortunate here.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, they look after us pretty well. Yeah, so beyond bones as well, vitamin D receptors are found in many parts of the body, so including immune cells, the brain, and even the heart. And this has made researchers suspect that vitamin D might actually have a wider kind of impact, supporting immune defenses, influencing mood and brain function, and possibly affecting risks of diseases like heart disease, diabetes, or cancer. We'll discuss the evidence on these topics soon, but it's clear that like severe deficiency of vitamin D is harmful, and maintaining adequate vitamin D levels is pretty important for overall health. So where do we get vitamin D from? So sunlight is number one. So when UVB rays from the sun hit our skin, a chemical reaction produces vitamin D3. Just a few minutes of midday sun exposure on bare skin during the summer can generate a good dose of vitamin D for most people. However, the amount that we make really varies, and it depends on the time of the day, the time of year, where you live, your skin tone, and even your age as well. So in a sunny country, people might get loads of vitamin D from being outdoors, but in places like the UK, especially in Scotland in the winter, sunlight is often too weak to trigger much production at all. So cloudy weather, staying mostly indoors or covering up with clothing will greatly reduce the vitamin D your skin can make. So this is actually a common misconception, I think, that a lot of people have, that they think, oh, I spend a lot of time outdoors even throughout the winter months, but actually if the sun's not kind of reaching the point that it needs to, like, our bodies just will not be able to produce vitamin D efficiently. So even though you might feel like you're doing all the kind of actions and behaviors that you need, you might not be.
That's good to know. I am someone who is solar powered. Let's put it that way. Like my mood and well-being is just directly tied to sunlight, which is true for many people, but also like literally why I live in Mexico. Like I can't.
Yeah, I totally get that.
I don't think I could hang if I were in your neck of the woods.
I try and lie to myself about it quite a lot. I'm like, no, it can't have that much of an impact. I'm fine. And then when the spring comes around and that first bit of sunlight hits your skin, you're like, oh, wow, this is what a human is supposed to feel like.
Right. I'm so fortunate to like, we just don't have many cloudy days. We're like getting into rainy season, and that's when we have some cloud, but there's still usually sunlight. So I'm thinking about what you're saying about the sun strength and timing and such. I'm thinking maybe I'm in an environment where it is such that I'm getting a lot of vitamin D because of where we're at, sun strength, etc.
Yeah, but I guess maybe you're someone who works a lot indoors as well. So I think sometimes it can be quite deceptive where we think like we're getting enough, but maybe not. So yeah, so we can also get vitamin D from foods as well, though natural sources are pretty limited. It's things like oily fish, like salmon, mackerel, and sardines. Egg yolks and liver also contain smaller amounts, but typical diets just will not provide enough for most people. You'll probably have this as well. Like you'll see lots of cereals and breads and stuff will be fortified with vitamin D. I know a lot of the kind of like milk replacements and stuff are too. I think in the US, a lot of the milk's like regular cow's milk, is that fortified with vitamin D as well, I believe?
I think so. And I'm going off of memory and thinking about the Got Milk campaign that we talked
like
about in another episode.
Yeah. It's
interesting,
like
all about vitamin D and all about bone health, right?
Yeah, it's cool. And I guess there's lots of more kind of foods. There's people calling for more foods to be fortified, but I guess with the current political climate in the US and a certain person in the US fighting against kind of fortification and that kind of thing, maybe we won't be making progress there because, maybe we won't speculate on why, but like idiocy, maybe, I don't know, many reasons.
I think that's it. And just like PSA fortification is one of the greatest public health feats alongside other very important public health feats. Just thinking anything other than that is wild.
It's always amazing. You see this in those influencer videos where they're like, oh, use this recipe or use this product because there's fewer ingredients. But then you look at the one they're bad mouthing and it's like, well, it's actually just fortified with things that make it far more nutritious for you. So you're way better off going for the one that this person is trying to criticize whilst looking like an idiot. So it's it's pretty infuriating. There we go. So risks of vitamin D. So vitamin D deficiency means having a lower level of vitamin D in the body that is needed for health, but what counts can vary from country to country. So within the UK, a blood level of 25 nanomoles per litre of the vitamin D marker is often used as the threshold. Below that risks problems, once again, like kind of rickets and bone issues. But interestingly, other organizations like in the US, they use a higher threshold. So the UK was 25, but in the US, the threshold is 50 nanomoles per litre. So it's quite a lot higher. And a lot of people don't have optimal levels, especially in the wintertime. And here's a pretty startling fact I found, that in the UK, about 30 to 40% of adults have low vitamin D. So that's below the 25 in the winter months. And I think the US was around 35% as well. So it's pretty similar. And then even in the summer, when sunshine is pretty plentiful, a significant minority of people, like around 8% of adults, I think it was, still have very low levels. In Scotland, for example, which is pretty sad to read this stat, like even at the end of summertime, they think around 17% of adults are still deficient in vitamin D. And then anyone with darker skin, so those such as kind of like South Asian or African heritage living in the UK, they had an even greater proportion of vitamin D deficiency year round. And in one study actually showed that 53% of South Asian women in southern England were deficient in summer, rising to 75% in winter. So the numbers are pretty high.
Like with more melanin in your skin or darker skin, are your vitamin D needs greater? Or is it like you don't synthesize the vitamin D from the sun as efficiently?
Yeah, exactly. So people with darker skin, they have more melanin in their skin, which, while protective against sun damage, for example, it actually reduces the skin's ability to produce vitamin D. So it means that compared to someone with very fair skin, someone with darker skin would need longer sun exposure to make the same amount of vitamin D. And then when you're living in places like the good old UK or many states across the US as well, you're just not going to be able to make enough, unfortunately, to hit the levels of 25 or 50 nanomoles per litre. So,
wow, and that difference is that feels very significant to me between UK and US, and I wonder if it's just like what is reasonable in the climate of the UK.
Yeah, I think it was really interesting. I was trying to kind of get a definitive answer on that, but I think it's just the way a lot of countries tend to analyze research slightly differently and come to different findings, and then you kind of put into context kind of like the way of life in a certain country or what the majority of the population are living their life like. So there's so many different factors that influence it, but I found like it's quite a big difference between the UK and US. But so it was quite confusing, but yeah, those are the recommendations there.
Well, I mean, imagine if there was like the 50 nanomole threshold in the UK. It'd be like 99% of the population is deficient, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there was also this, which I didn't know before doing this episode's research. So those who are obese or have other certain medical conditions, because vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin and can be hidden away in body fat, if someone carries more body fat, you may actually have lower circulating vitamin D levels. So if you are someone who does carry a bit more body fat, you might need a kind of a higher dose of vitamin D supplementation than someone who wasn't. Yeah, I never knew that, which is very good to know.
I'm learning quite a lot. Are we going to talk about dosing and like what is too much?
Yeah, we absolutely will. And yeah, we will definitely get to that in terms of supplementation kind of quantities. Also, just one other kind of demographic of people that tend to be deficient is babies and young children, especially those who are breastfed, because a lot of the milk that if someone is using formula, it's usually fortified with vitamin D. And whereas if someone is breastfeeding their child, then it means that it's likely that you'll need to be consuming. Within the UK, for example, it's recommended that all children under 1 receive 8.5 to 10 UG of vitamin D daily. And children 1 to 4 is to take 10 daily as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and that's, as I said, we in Scotland, when you're sent home with your baby, they kind of give you your vitamin D, and the health visitors that come around will constantly ask if you've got some and top it up for you. So it's an important one.
That's wonderful. When Milo was born, I only knew that he needed a vitamin D supplement because a friend told me, and then I looked it up, and it was actually really hard for us to find. We ended up having to bring it from the US. Okay. I'm not saying it doesn't exist here. I just couldn't find.
Interesting.
I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it at the pharmacy, and I wasn't sure where else to get it. So I ended up like having someone coming to visit bring it from the US, and that feels concerning.
Yeah, Jude, my son, is so used to it now. Like every night we give him his little vitamin D drop, and I think they must have some sort of sweetener or something in it, because he's always quite excited when you give him his vitamin D daily now. It's become part of the routine. And also just kind of final point as well is some people with digestive disorders like Crohn's and celiac, for example, or if you have kidney or liver diseases, it can impair your vitamin D absorption or activation as well, which can increase your risk of deficiency too. So if you're someone who fits one of those categories, then it might be worth getting your levels checked anyway. Okay, so let's look at the nerdy research part. So kind of like, what are the benefits of supplementation? Okay, so vitamin D is one of the most researched supplements out there. Thousands of studies have been done, and some show really promising benefits and others show minimal effects. And this is actually another really fun area, which I'm assuming is why different countries have different recommendations in terms of supplementation, is because you'll read one paper that makes it sound like vitamin D is like the elixir of life and it's going to save us all from impending doom. And then you look at the next paper and it kind of craps all over it and makes it look like it's something that we shouldn't really put too much of an emphasis on. So yeah, it was quite a fun one to delve into the research for, and a little bit frustrating too.
I'm curious how you navigated this. Like what? Well, I guess
I'm just going to report both and let people make their own minds up, as that's what we all have to do. There are some pretty kind of conclusive or general recommendations from a lot of the research, even if the findings are slightly different. So I still think people will get some good takeaways from it, even if it's not like XYZ is the answer here, you know?
Just going off of what you said, like it also seems like, well, I mean, we all metabolize things differently, like any micronutrient, but like hearing all of the variation in how much body fat you hold versus skin tone, et cetera, it seems really tough to actually get clear benefits and such, because people are processing or metabolizing the vitamin D so differently.
Yeah, it's so true, it's exactly the issue. It's like when we were researching any other topic, like the stretching one, for example, there's so many variables that are measured in different ways that it's impossible to say, right, everyone needs to do this, just because you just can't do it, which I think is why we'll talk about this at the end, but it's important to take all this information in so you're knowledgeable about it, but then you need to go and check what your levels are. If you're someone who's thinking, right, I live somewhere where I might not be exposed to enough sunlight, maybe my lifestyle's like this, maybe I'm getting sick a lot, all these kinds of things. If you think maybe I might be deficient, rather than just tanking a load of vitamin D supplementation, is just go and get your levels checked. So you can just get a simple blood test and you'll be able to find out what your vitamin D levels are and whether you need something to top them up.
Good,
because I can't go outside in the sun more because it just doesn't exist.
That's really sad.
Yeah. Really sad. Okay, so we'll start with kind of bone health and muscle function first. So when it comes to bones, vitamin D's benefit is pretty straightforward, to be honest with you, in cases of deficiency, where giving vitamin D will prevent or cure, once again, like rickets in children or other bone issues in adults. And these conditions are directly caused by a lack of vitamin D. So there's no doubt that if someone is very low in vitamin D, like supplements are unbelievably important. They can literally cure a disease that once crippled children, for example. Like it is really important. But what about people who already have decent vitamin D levels? Will taking more make your bones even stronger or prevent fractures? And this is where the research gets a little bit mixed and quite nuanced. This is where me and Kate get excited, because there's like fun nuanced things to look at. But for older adults, especially like postmenopausal women and men over 70 who are at risk of osteoporosis, vitamin D combined with calcium has modest benefits for reducing fractures. Some larger studies have found that taking both often 800 IU of vitamin D and 500 to 1200 milligrams of calcium per day can lower the risk of hip fractures and other major fractures in older people with low baseline intake or low vitamin D levels. So that's kind of the research that's prompting like, okay, there might be some benefit to doing this. And vitamin D helps the body to use calcium. And calcium is the raw material for bones. So it kind of makes sense that if you're supplementing with both, there's probably going to be some benefit. But on the other hand, trials of vitamin D alone for fracture prevention have often shown like no significant benefit in generally healthy adults. There's a lot of research papers, which I will not read here, but basically in short, if you're deficient, it will really help to reduce fractures and issues with bone health. If you have good levels already, there's probably not going to be any benefits.
I think this is just total conjecture, but I was thinking like at the age of that one study with men over 70 or postmenopausal women, the damage has been done. Like if you haven't built up bone strength or engaged in behaviors that are going to help with bone strength, like vitamin D isn't going to come and save you is what
exactly.
I'm getting, right? Like it's
get
doesn't
yourself
hurt,
to baseline so your body
but
can work
yes,
as it should
exactly.
do. And then anything else. There
Exactly.
was actually a cool twist here, like a couple of trials that gave very high doses of vitamin D. For example, a large one-time injection or like a massive once yearly dose. Actually found that more falls or fractures were in the high dose group.
Oh, wow.
And it appears that mega doses might overshoot the mark and possibly cause negative effects like muscle weakness or balance issues or whatever. So the safer approach shown to be beneficial is just like moderate intake and making sure that your levels once again are staying pretty static. Yeah.
That's interesting.
So yeah, immunity and infections. This is the topic that a lot of people ask me about on social media when I put my Q&As up about vitamin D. I know we're coming into summer, so these questions tend to quieten down a little bit, but it's a huge area of interest with vitamin D. And there's been a lot of talk about vitamin D as a booster for immune system in itself. And this comes from observations that vitamin D seems to help immune cells fight infections. It can trigger antimicrobial peptides that combat bacteria and viruses. And historically, for example, before antibiotics, sunlight, and therefore vitamin D, was used as a treatment for tuberculosis, the sun baths and sanatoriums, for example. So does taking vitamin D help you ward off colds, flu, or other infections? And some evidence says yes to a modest extent. There was a landmark study in the British Medical Journal in 2017, which pulled data from 25 clinical trials with over 11,000 participants and found that vitamin D supplements reduced the risk of acute respiratory infections like the common cold or bronchitis by about 12% overall. It seems promising. So in other words, like people taking vitamin D were slightly less likely to get at least one respiratory infection during the study period. And although that's pretty small, like it's still a pretty cool thing to not happen to once a year. And this meta-analysis found that the benefit was much greater in those who once again were very deficient to begin with. So among people who had low vitamin D levels, so under the 25 nanomoles per litre at baseline, taking a supplement reduced the risk of infection by as much as 50 to 70%.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
huge.
that's so significant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a huge number. So, but then people who had already good vitamin D levels, the benefits were much lower. So once again, exactly the same as bone health, bringing yourself up to the sensible level seems to be where all the benefit comes from. I was just going to say, like, it was really interesting because that study was really cool to read, but Public Health England weirdly distanced themselves from it and were like, there's not enough evidence and there's a lot too much conflicting advice for us just to say like, right, everyone take vitamin D. But it still looked pretty promising. And then I know this is what I'm probably going to ask the question on there, Kate, is COVID. Did you see this all happening during the pandemic?
I don't think I did.
Did you not? Okay.
I like heard chatter about it, but I don't think I like knew what you're going to say. So please enlighten me.
Yeah. So the reason I was aware of it initially, which then caused me to deep dive into the internet was, I'm not going to name who it was. It was like a friend of a friend. We'll just say that was ranting at me about how amazing vitamin D was at curing COVID. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And there was a lot of kind of like prominent internet scientists who were coming out and putting all their eggs in one basket here, being like, vitamin D is the cure, vitamin D is the cure. And the research around it is actually pretty interesting. So vitamin D's immune role, particularly in modulating inflammation, made it a plausible candidate for helping against COVID. So this led to a flurry of studies and even some governments taking action. So for instance, the UK government provided free vitamin D supplements to millions of clinically vulnerable people during the pandemic winter of 2020 and 2021, not as a proven COVID treatment, but as a precautionary measure to ensure that those at risk weren't deficient while stuck indoors. So what does the evidence say now? And it turns out to be quite a mixed picture. Observational studies did find that people with vitamin D deficiency were more likely to catch COVID and more likely to have severe illness. I will kind of once again caveat this with there's once again very conflicting advice on this and conflicting findings in the research. But vitamin D once again might support the immune system's ability to fight the virus and dampen excessive inflammation. By the end of 2020, the consensus of UK health bodies, so NICE, so the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, PHE and SACN, was that there wasn't enough evidence to recommend vitamin D specifically for preventing or treating COVID. And then, there was kind of rapid evidence review that concluded none of the studies found robust evidence to support taking vitamin D supplements to reduce the risk or severity of COVID. So, there was that.
I think my limited knowledge was people being like, my chiropractor says that vitamin D will cure COVID, and me being like, okay. Like,
Yeah, I
there's so
think
many
like
chiropractors saying so many things
yeah, it's always
during
the
COVID.
chiropractors.
But
And I know some good chiropractors. I will always
I know
caveat that
some
because
great
every time I
chiropractors.
criticize them on social media, I get nice ones I talk with often telling me to please stop bullying them. But they are a culprit for spreading a lot of misinformation.
I mean, we can caveat with like chiropractors with their own supplement line. That's all we need to
Okay,
say, right? Like
I like it. Yeah,
that's
yeah,
fair.
that's good.
But it would make sense to me that well, we talk about this so often, Michael. Nutrition science is tough. We have so many varying factors. Maybe lower vitamin D in individuals also means less healthful behaviors, less balanced diet, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
Different behaviors that would lead to someone being more susceptible to sickness. So even though the evidence is conflicting, it makes sense to me in that like you're not going wrong with making sure that your vitamin D levels are up to baseline
Yeah.
because you're probably engaging in behaviors, whether supplementation, more sunlight, etc., that help support your overall health.
Yeah, spot on. Exactly that. There are some really cool trials at the moment and ongoing into other like autoimmune conditions around vitamin D, which is quite a cool area of research. But once again, the evidence is still emerging, so I'm not going to kind of tell you that it's amazing, but it does seem a pretty cool thing. But once again, it's if your levels are deficient, you're going to have issues. So make sure they're back up to baseline. That's kind of a point I'm going to keep banging on about throughout this episode. And then I guess the next kind of big area was around mood and mental health. This idea comes partly from observation that seasonal affective disorder (SAD), a type of seasonal depression, hits people in the winter when sunlight and therefore vitamin D production is low. And also the brain has vitamin D receptors, and some studies have linked low vitamin D levels with a potential for a higher risk of depression. But does taking vitamin D help or prevent it? The evidence has been inconsistent, but it is quite cool. A number of clinical trials have tested vitamin D for improving mood or depressive symptoms, and early results were all over the place. Some studies found improvements and others found no impact whatsoever. However, larger analysis have shared a bit more light. There was a comprehensive meta-analysis published in 2024, which looked at 31 trials with over 24,000 participants, examining the effect of vitamin D supplements on depression and mood in general. And the analysis found that vitamin D supplementation did have a mild overall positive effect on depressive symptoms, but the improvement was pretty modest. On average, there was a small but statistically significant reduction in depressive scores in those taking vitamin D compared to placebo. But interestingly, the effect was more pronounced in people who had clinically significant depression to begin with. So in those individuals, vitamin D made a bigger difference. Their depressive scores were improved a lot more than those that were not depressed beforehand or only had mild mood complaints. So once again, like it's pretty inconclusive. And the same point again, it feels like if your levels are low, your body's not going to be able to function optimally. So get those numbers back up to baseline as quickly as possible.
And even those slight findings, like if you are battling depression, you want that. Anything helps, right? Like that sounded
exactly.
like it was statistically significant, but not like significant in the lay term, but like also sounds beneficial.
Yeah, exactly. Like keeping vitamin D sufficient is just like one piece of the mental health puzzle, but absolutely in no way a cure at all. So yeah, that's kind of like the reasons people take it. Those are kind of the big hitters. As I said, there's some research into other areas, but we'll look now briefly at dosing, because I know this is kind of what people are going to want to have some answers on. So vitamin D is measured in two types of units, which makes it a little bit confusing when you're looking at dosing here. So it's either measured in micrograms, so UG as the symbols, and international units. And I've had this conversation with clients and people on social media so often because of the confusion around supplement labels. And the conversion is 1 microgram equals 40 IU.
That's
so
very
yeah,
confusing and
you do the
unhelpful.
math.
I cannot.
For someone who's dreadful at maths, but not you, Kate, me, I always don't like this. I don't like it at all. Can we just stick with 1 unit, please? So the UK recommendation is 10 UG, so 10 micrograms. Yeah, the UK recommendation is 10 UG a day. It's the same as 400 IU a day. So if a bottle says 1000 IU, that's 25 micrograms. Yeah. Did I say that right? I think I said that right.
I think so. But now I'm trying. Wait. Yeah. No, I get it.
We're going to, in the show notes with all the research papers, once again, I'm going to link. I'm also going to link to the UK government recommendations here. So I'm going to link to these in the show notes too, if anyone wants to look over them. And so, yeah, in the UK, recommendation is 10 micrograms, 400 IU year round as well. So that's the general recommendations that the UK government gives if you're in an at-risk group especially, and during autumn and winter for everyone else. This helps keep blood levels in a healthy range and it's safe to take regularly. It's a little bit different. So the US and Canada recommend 600 IU, so 15 micrograms, so a slightly higher dose than that of the UK, I guess because their baseline levels, they want them to be a bit higher. And it mostly comes down to, once again, sun exposure. They assume the population is getting. All of these recommendations aim to make sure that 97.5% of people get enough to avoid deficiency. That's the overall goal, with a little buffer built in. So if you're generally healthy and taking 400 to 800 IU a day, then you're probably pretty covered.
Okay. Yep. I had to think about the different conversions.
Sorry, guys. This is mine and your fault, Kate, for having a podcast where we have people in the US and UK listening.
Yeah,
it's our fault.
Oh, so is one of those units used in the US and one in the UK?
No. I just meant like in dosing sizes.
Oh, yeah. No, that's fine. Yeah. I was just thinking, why can't we standardize this dosage?
I agree. I hate it. I wish that we could. And then if you've had a blood test as well, so as I kind of mentioned at the start of this, if you are wondering whether you have a deficiency, go to your GP, go to your PCP and get checked, because it is a different story. So doctors may prescribe really higher doses temporarily, like 20,000 IU once a week or 1 to 2,000 IU daily until your levels come back up. And then they might switch you to a more regular maintenance dose. But once again, that's something you need to speak to your doctor about the best way to do that. But yeah, that's how we hopefully get those numbers back up to where they should be.
And that's a good takeaway. Like I've learned a lot from this episode. If you're watching on YouTube, my yawning isn't that Michael's boring. He's not. It's that I can't stop.
Our editor is fantastic.
But I'll say it's not you, it's me. I've learned a lot, and the takeaway is clear. We don't always have a clear takeaway, Michael. So like, bless us having like, here, come away from this episode thinking, get your vitamin D levels up to baseline and a lot of things will be taken care of.
Exactly. And there's a really cool addition. So literally just as I was about to come into recording this episode, there is someone who I follow on social media who I'm going to shout out the page because I really like it. Bear with me. I don't want to get it wrong. So the handle is literally PCOS Nutrition. And they
Did I not send that to you?
I think it was you that sent it to me, Kate. Thank you very much. I was thinking that, yeah. And compassionate nutrition coach for PCOS. And the content's great. And they highlighted literally just before I came into this that there was a new piece of research that has just come out as well around PCOS and vitamin D3 supplementation. So it was a recent 2025 clinical trial investigating whether vitamin D supplementation could help manage symptoms of polycystic ovary syndrome. So the double-blind placebo-controlled study followed women with PCOS for 24 weeks, and participants received either 30,000 IU a week of vitamin D3 or a placebo, followed by another 12 weeks of vitamin D for all. And the results showed that vitamin D supplementation significantly improved menstrual cycle regularity, ovulation rates, and ovarian morphology, notably in women with high androgen levels or an elevated LH-FCH ratio. Vitamin D reduced testosterone levels and boosted ovulation. So whilst it's not a magic bullet, the study suggests that vitamin D3 could be a useful, low-cost addition to PCOS treatment, particularly in women with vitamin D deficiency.
Oh, so that's great.
Really cool new piece of research that's just come out there.
Also, to the point that I just said low cost, this is a low-cost supplement compared to others.
Sure.
And that makes it a lot more accessible, which is really great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. I was going to say, where do you get yours from, Kate? Just the sun. So ignore that question.
But maybe. But I'm rethinking that. I'm thinking.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm actually considering getting all my bloods and stuff taken soon to see if I've got any deficiency. So I'll be quite interested to see whether me supplementing with my supplement from My Protein, that's the one that I buy, not an ad. It's just really affordable and their quality is pretty solid. It'd be interesting to see whether that's helping me get to the levels that I need whilst living in Scotland, or whether I do need to change my dosing at all. So I'm quite intrigued to do that. I will do.
You know, this, you're probably trying to wrap up, but I'm thinking now I've got to go back and find this. When I did the supplement episode, I had this whole section on vitamin D that I didn't add because I think I talked over an hour. And I just couldn't add it in. But I had some really interesting research on vitamin D and the variability of actual vitamin D in supplements. I'm going to go back and find that. Okay. Because I'll put it in the show notes because it was interesting. And I think it had some recommendations for some specific supplements that are a little more
pungent.
Trustworthy. Yeah. Trustworthy. Yeah. Because I think it was like, oh gosh, I don't want to misquote it, but it was like the amount of vitamin D they found in this giant sample of supplements was like between 1% and 600% or something wild of what it said. So I'll go find that and I'll make sure to add it to the show notes.
Yeah, please do. And then I guess just like to wrap it up completely is like the general tone from medical experts is simply like, yes, we need to address vitamin D deficiency, but let's do it really smartly. Don't ignore vitamin D, but let's not idolize it either. And that's kind of quite a nice way to approach supplementing with it. So
that's
there
good.
we are, vitamin D wrapped up.
And you thought this would be less than 30 minutes.
I did. I was like, this will be a quick one. 20, 30 minutes. That'd be great. Never with us, Kate.
This is great. I learned a lot. Thank you, Michael.
Cool. Thank you so much. And as always, guys, we are recording these for YouTube. So if you want to watch along as we do them, please go check us out over there. If you can just hit the like, subscribe button, share it with all your friends, anything you can do to spread the name of the podcast, we would really, really appreciate it. We put a lot of love and time into this podcast, so it's always nice when we've actually this week, Kate, I've shared a lot of them with Kate. I've been receiving a lot of really nice messages about the podcast.
Me too.
And it's
me too.
This sounds really silly to say, but it's so easy to get wrapped up in like looking at numbers of social media stuff, and I'll be like, oh, this video didn't get that many views, or this episode didn't get as many listens, but then when you think of it as humans, it's a lot of people, and you kind of forget that there's people listening to this rather than just statistics that we annoyingly are told to focus on, you know?
Absolutely. And the messages we get are so kind and often leads to a lot of other conversations. And I'm just so grateful. I'm like, people want to listen to us? What?
I know, right?
That's wild. I'm so honored. I'm so honored.
It's very cool. It is very nice. It's very flattering. So thank you so much for your kind messages. I'm glad you're enjoying these episodes. And we'll see you all again in a couple of weeks, I guess.
Thanks for listening. Talk soon.
Bye.